On the central plateau of Ethiopia stand 11 churches, each carved from a single gigantic block of stone.
A set of ancient Christian manuscripts from Ethiopia has been dated earlier than assumed. Recent AI scans surfaced faint post-resurrection teachings attributed to Jesus. The texts stood outside Roman shaping and highlight warnings, inner formation, and a distinct frame of spiritual authority. They now appear to be the earliest complete Christian illuminated manuscripts still in continuous use. Something is moving, though the world barely notices. Recent analysis has confirmed that the manuscripts from the Abhagarama Monastery are early Christian originals dated between 330 and 650 CE. They are not later copies. They stand as some of the oldest complete illuminated Gospels still in use. AI scanning has now retrieved lines that the human eye could not recover. Words locked inside the Ethiopian tradition for centuries are visible again. This is not a new message. It is a restored one. Ethiopia has carried a broader canon than the West. 88 books, not 66. The Book of the Covenant, the Didaskalia, the full Book of Enoch. These texts circulated without interruption for more than 1,500 years. They were not shaped by Roman decisions, European conflict, or later doctrinal restructuring. Their continuity signals a stream that never passed through Western filters. Three movements make this moment weighty. First, manuscripts outside Western selection patterns expose an older line of theological memory. They show what survived at the origin. Second, Ethiopia preserves extended post-resurrection teachings of Jesus. Warnings, ethical discipline, interior alignment. He opened their minds to understand the Scriptures, Luke 24. The recovered material fits this pattern of unveiled instruction. Third, their preservation through invasion, fire, and political collapse shows that stewardship was held by prayer, not power. No empire kept them. Monks did. The relevance is direct. AI is not producing doctrine. It is uncovering manuscripts kept steady by a community that never claimed control over history. This is a meeting point between ancient fidelity and present technology. It arrives at a time marked by spiritual fatigue, institutional fragmentation, and rising interest in the roots of Christian authority. The timing is notable. Global conditions are shifting. People are reevaluating origins rather than structures. Something is moving beneath the surface. The manuscripts simply surfaced first. The primary event. The confirmed dating of the Abhagarama manuscripts has shifted the frame of early Christian history. The evidence places them between 330 and 650 CE. They are not products of the medieval period. They belong to Christianity's first centuries, formed when memory of the apostolic age was still active. This is the primary event. Everything else moves around it. The verification is not speculation. Radiocarbon testing, codicological review, and comparative analysis point to an origin far earlier than assumed. The outcome is direct. One of the oldest complete gospel sets on earth has been sitting in active liturgical use while the world debated its age. The manuscripts did not wait for recognition. They remained where monks had kept them, protected by continuity rather than influence. AI scanning amplified the discovery. Layers of faded ink, erased by time and environment, have now been reconstructed. These were words hidden in plain sight. They could not be read by the human eye. Imaging captured wavelengths beneath the surface and revealed strokes that had collapsed into the parchment. The process did not create meaning. It uncovered what was already there. This raises a pattern consistent with Scripture. Nothing is hidden that will not be made manifest. Luke 8. The text emerged at a moment when global systems are strained and spiritual foundations are being reconsidered. Ethiopia's broader canon gives structure to the discovery. The Ethiopian tradition preserved 88 books, not the 66 recognized in the Western stream. This includes the full Book of Enoch, early ecclesial instructions such as the Didascalia, and covenantal writings that shaped monastic and community life. These texts stayed in rotation. They were copied, read, recited, and placed in the rhythms of worship. They did not undergo consolidation by imperial councils, doctrinal realignments, or political reshaping. Their stability reflects custodianship rather than control. The survival of these manuscripts signals a movement. What persisted in Ethiopia is not an alternate Christianity, but an earlier witness. It holds theological memory that did not pass through Roman or European selection pressures. This does not elevate one stream over another. It simply shows that multiple currents existed, and one of them remained intact in a region that preserved continuity through prayer, fasting, and monastic discipline. The pattern matches Jesus' instruction: hold fast what you have heard. 2 Timothy, though here quoted briefly for resonance. Ethiopia held fast. A central element in the recovered manuscripts is the account of Jesus' post-resurrection teaching. The texts present a sustained 40-day discourse. It is structured, sober, and internal. The Gospels mention this period but preserve only fragments. Ethiopia maintains extended material. The themes are specific. First, warnings about distortion. Second, clarity on internal spiritual decline. Third, correction of misplaced reliance on religious identity without transformation. These themes carry weight. They confront the tendency of institutions to drift once authority becomes formal rather than spiritual. They identify the danger of assuming proximity to truth while losing obedience to it. They note the rise of leaders who handle sacred words without internal alignment. The tone resembles the directness found in Revelation when Jesus says, "Strengthen what remains." Revelation 3. It is concise, alert, and unsentimental. The recovered material fits the wider Ethiopian preservation pattern. Writings such as Enoch also warn against distortion, mixture, and the misuse of authority. The Book of the Covenant emphasizes ordered community and internal discipline. The Didascalia gives pastoral instruction for a church under pressure. These are not abstract ideals. They describe real fault lines within early Christian movement. The Garama manuscripts now appear as evidence that these concerns were addressed directly by communities close to the root. The 40-day teachings intensify this. They portray Jesus instructing disciples not only on mission, but on vigilance. The warnings are not political statements. They speak to spiritual posture, even when political conditions deteriorate. This aligns with the principle that prophecy directs history, not the reverse. Political turbulence does not generate revelation. Revelation interprets political turbulence. The timing of the manuscript's re-examination is notable. Global institutions are strained. Nations operate under uncertainty. Political actors search for legitimacy. But the manuscripts did not surface to comment on geopolitics. They surfaced because a deeper alignment is being tested. The world sees instability. Scripture frames it differently. See that you are not alarmed, for these must take place. Matthew 24. The emphasis is preparation, not reaction. What stands out is the convergence of factors. One of the earliest illuminated gospel sets is authenticated. AI recovers text lost for centuries. Ethiopia's canon contextualizes the findings. Post-resurrection teachings provide internal correction. Warnings about distortion align with current spiritual fatigue. These are separate data points, yet they form a coherent movement. Something is unfolding. The world registers the archaeology. It has not yet recognized the pattern. The pattern behind the event. The central pattern becomes visible when the location is acknowledged first. Ethiopia preserved its texts without political editing or doctrinal standardization from Rome. This is not a claim of superiority. It is a traceable fact. The Ethiopian stream developed apart from councils, imperial negotiations, or later denominational revisions. Its manuscripts show what faith looks like when continuity is shaped by prayer, not by governance. Preservation depended on monastic copying. The work was manual, slow, and repetitive. It did not rely on institutional control. Scribes passed texts from generation to generation with an attention formed by worship, not administration. This removed the usual pressure points that alter texts: political consolidation, doctrinal rivalry, and attempts to unify identity through enforced standardization. Ethiopia stayed outside those cycles. The manuscripts carried the imprint of a tradition that kept Scripture as Scripture, not as a tool. Faith remained local, continuous, and liturgical. It was held by communities that measured time through fasting seasons, prayer hours, and communal reading. Their authority structure was spiritual rather than administrative. This model did not produce theological innovation. It produced stability. It allowed texts to survive without negotiation. The rhythm resembles the directive in Acts. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and the breaking of bread. Acts 2. Steady practice guarded memory more effectively than any official mechanism. This explains part of the preservation, but not all. The manuscripts survived invasion, war, and fire. They remained intact while kingdoms rose and collapsed. They outlived attempts by external powers to reshape the region. They remained when libraries elsewhere were emptied or destroyed. Their endurance signals a priority that superseded organizational restructuring. Communities protected the word even when protecting themselves was uncertain. This reveals an underlying pattern. Devotion outlasts systems. The survival cannot be separated from timing. Lost texts re-emerge globally only when technology makes them readable again. AI imaging did not restore them through force. It revealed them by precision. The words were present. They only lacked visibility. The principle echoes a biblical rhythm. At the proper time, he will bring it forth. 1 Timothy. The reappearance aligns with a moment when global structures are strained and long-settled assumptions are being revisited. This introduces a repeating pattern in Christian history. Early material resurfaces when the world enters transition or instability. The Dead Sea Scrolls appeared on the edge of geopolitical upheaval. The Nag Hammadi texts surfaced when ideological structures were shifting across nations. Now, the Abba Garima manuscripts offer new clarity as global institutions face fatigue, fragmentation, and recalibration. The manuscripts do not create the instability. They speak into it. The movement is not political. Politics reacts to transition. Prophetic patterns identify it. Ethiopia's preserved canon, the reappearance of early teachings, and the timing of global uncertainty form a single arc. The manuscripts are part of a larger pattern. Hidden foundations become visible when societies lose confidence in their constructed frameworks. The text returns when people search upstream rather than downstream. The Ethiopian case reinforces this point. No external authority curated its canon. No committee filtered its selection. No empire shaped its theological memory. Its continuity grew from unbroken worship and local responsibility. The pattern shows that spiritual memory held by devotion can outlast political memory held by power. Jesus framed this principle with clarity. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away. Matthew. The manuscripts are evidence of that endurance. The re-emergence of faded writing through AI fits the same trajectory. Global systems are built on visibility, metrics, and information control. Yet the most significant texts in this moment are those that waited silently until technology allowed the world to see them again. Their emergence exposes a gap between what is present and what is perceived. Something has been active beneath the surface of history, and the world is only now noticing its outline. The pattern behind this event is not accidental. A line connects the unedited canon, the monastic continuity, the survival through conflict, the timing of reappearance, and the use of modern tools to expose ancient words. The convergence shows movement, not coincidence. It points to a shift already in progress. The manuscripts emerged when the environment became unstable enough for foundations to matter again. This is the underlying pattern. When global frameworks weaken, early Christian memory rises to the surface, not to validate institutions, but to realign the people who still listen. Something is unfolding quietly. The manuscripts simply mark the pattern with precision. Scriptural frame. The scriptural frame is clear and direct. Jude 1:14-15 cites Enoch without hesitation. This shows that early Christian authors knew the text and treated its warnings as relevant. The Ethiopian preservation of Enoch aligns with this early recognition. It is not an outlier. It is part of the same memory that shaped the first generation of believers. Acts 1:3 states that Jesus appeared to the disciples and taught for 40 days after the resurrection. The verse is brief, but it establishes a defined period of instruction. The Ethiopian material echoes that time frame. It extends what Scripture acknowledges without contradicting it. The pattern is consistent. A concise biblical reference supported by a preserved tradition that did not pass through later filters. These 2 points form a frame for the manuscript's reemergence. They mark continuity between the written canon and the wider early Christian environment. They show that the themes now resurfacing did not originate from modern interpretation or technological reconstruction. They were already present at the foundation. The alignment is simple. Jude confirms Enoch. Acts confirms the 40-day teaching. The Ethiopian manuscripts hold both threads in uninterrupted form. Something long buried is becoming visible again, and the timing signals movement beyond academic interest. Convergence with the current context. The present moment shows a clear shift. The world is entering a period marked by spiritual fatigue, institutional mistrust, and cultural fragmentation. Confidence in structures is thinning. Established authorities struggle to hold coherence. Many observe the symptoms, but few recognize the deeper movement. Early Christian manuscripts resurfacing during this environment is not incidental. It matches a pattern in which foundational material reappears when surface systems lose stability. Religion in much of the world is now associated with organizational identity rather than internal transformation. Belonging has become administrative. Belief has become institutional. The focus has moved toward alignment with structures instead of alignment with truth. This drift leaves a gap between public confession and interior reality. It mirrors the warnings found in the recovered Ethiopian material. The emphasis is not on political loyalties or external labels. It centers on discipline, clarity, and integrity. Be watchful, Revelation 3, carries the same tone. The manuscripts echo it with precision. Early manuscripts highlight a different structure from what dominates modern religious life. They stress internal formation. They outline ethical gravity. They call for humility over position. They focus on spiritual authority, rooted in obedience rather than title. These dynamics challenge institutional Christianity. because they introduce a standard that cannot be maintained through administration alone. Ethiopia's tradition kept this orientation by preserving texts within liturgy rather than committees. It held Scripture as something lived, not negotiated. Ethiopia's historical isolation from colonial, doctrinal, and geopolitical frameworks allowed its Christian memory to survive without absorption into external systems. This does not idealize Ethiopia. It identifies a structural fact. The faith developed without replacement by foreign authorities. The canon stabilized through transmission, not restructuring. This independence kept the manuscripts intact, while other regions reorganized repeatedly. Their survival demonstrates that Christian continuity is possible without alignment to empire, politics, or global institutions. It reflects a principle found in Scripture. "My kingdom is not of this world." John 18. The Ethiopian evidence shows how that principle functions across centuries. The return of ancient manuscripts in this particular decade aligns with renewed interest in origins, authenticity, and prophetic context. People sense that present narratives are insufficient. They search backward to understand the present moment. Institutions promote unity, yet fragmentation increases. Systems call for trust, yet credibility diminishes. The resurfacing of early texts enters this vacuum. They provide a reminder that Christianity has primary sources older than the frameworks now in crisis. Their timing suggests a convergence between technological capacity, spiritual need, and historical readiness. Israel remains a geopolitical and spiritual center. Movements in that region always draw global attention. But the circulation of early manuscripts outside Israel shows another pattern. Prophetic material is not geographically centralized. It moves where stewardship has been maintained. Ethiopia preserved material Israel no longer held. This does not remove Israel's role. It expands the understanding that God has preserved witness across multiple regions. Prophetic alignment is broader than borders. The Dai'u manuscripts reinforce this by surfacing from a location the global church often overlooked. Political structures do not determine prophecy. Prophetic patterns shape political direction. Modern governments respond to immediate pressure. Prophetic material addresses the deeper current that precedes public events. When ancient texts re-enter global awareness, political actors may attempt to frame them for cultural or ideological use. Yet the texts themselves do not originate from political interests. They speak to spiritual posture, accuracy, and accountability. They observe the conditions under which nations shift, but they do not arise from those shifts. The present convergence shows several connected movements. Global instability, loss of institutional authority, renewed interest in early foundations, the resurfacing of manuscripts from Christianity's earliest centuries, their alignment with warnings about distortion and internal decline, their emphasis on humility, clarity, and discipline, their emergence at a moment when many sense that current structures are nearing the limits of coherence. These movements operate together, not separately. Something is occurring beneath the visible cycles of politics, media, and culture. It is not sensational. It is not abrupt. It is slow and weighty. Ancient memory is returning to the foreground. At the same time, modern systems are losing definition. The Ethiopian manuscripts function as markers of this transition. They are not the cause of the shift. They reveal its outline. The convergence signals that the world is moving into a phase where foundational truth will matter more than institutional category. Early Christianity is speaking again, not through new revelations but through preserved ones. The timing indicates that the shift is already underway. The manuscripts simply surface as the clearest evidence that something deeper is unfolding, while the world focuses on what is unstable. The resurfacing of these manuscripts did not occur in isolation. They became readable only when two forces converged: global instability and technological maturity. The world is unsettled, and technology has reached a point where what was hidden in faded ink can be recovered with precision. This convergence is structural. It shows that ancient memory tends to reactivate when modern society begins to question its own foundations. The moment is not random. It follows a recognizable pattern in which forgotten material returns when existing frameworks lose coherence. AI scanning removed a barrier that centuries of preservation could not overcome. The text did not change. Visibility did. The timing reveals a deeper trajectory. When institutions lose trust, when belief becomes procedural, and when culture accelerates without direction, people turn back to origins. The recovered manuscripts speak into this shift. They do not offer new doctrines. They restore what was already present. Ask for the ancient paths. Jeremiah 6 captures the underlying motion without elaboration. Ethiopia's canon exposes a dimension often missing from institutional Christianity. Early Christianity recorded more internal warnings than many later models preserved. The emphasis was on vigilance, accuracy, humility, and spiritual clarity. It confronted distortion early. It recognized the risk of collapse from within. The Ethiopian manuscripts maintain that voice because they remained outside systems that prioritized doctrinal uniformity over internal formation. Their presence shows the gap between what early believers heard and what later structures emphasized. A consistent theme appears across the recovered material. Spiritual decline begins when identity replaces obedience and ritual replaces transformation. This is not a critique of practice. It is a recognition of sequence. When form outruns substance, vitality erodes. When belonging becomes a substitute for discipline, foundations weaken. The manuscripts reintroduce this reality at a moment when global religion is often performed rather than lived. Their tone aligns with Scripture. Be doers of the word, James 1. The call is direct. The texts are returning during a period in which global culture is materially active but spiritually dormant. Productivity increases, but discernment weakens. Institutions grow louder, but clarity fades. Many sense the void, even if they cannot define it. The resurfacing manuscripts intersect with this condition. They do not fill the void. They reveal it. They highlight the distance between external movement and internal alignment. The release of early manuscripts signals a shift in priority. External performance is losing its authority. Internal discernment is becoming necessary again. The timing aligns with a world confronting limits, searching for direction beyond political, economic, or ideological frameworks. Prophetic patterns often become visible when nations reorder themselves, not through spectacle but through quiet reorientation. This moment matters because the manuscripts mark the threshold of that reorientation. They surface as evidence that deeper foundations still exist. They remind the world that spiritual accuracy precedes institutional stability. They call attention to movement beneath the visible layer of events. Something is unfolding. The manuscripts did not cause it. They reveal that it has already begun. The Ethiopian manuscripts stand as evidence of continuity, independent preservation, and unedited early Christian memory. Their recovery through AI is not innovation. It is exposure. What remained intact outside Roman standardization is now visible again. The timing signals transition. Knowledge once sealed emerges when global spiritual structures weaken and societies search backward for clarity. He who has ears, let him hear, Matthew, captures the weight of this moment. The manuscripts confirm that early Christianity centered on inner transformation, ethical steadiness, and disciplined discernment, not institutional power or political alignment. Their reappearance aligns with a broader shift toward prophetic examination and spiritual sobriety. Something long buried has resurfaced. Its return points to a renewed attention to foundations at the precise moment the world recognizes its need for them.